Let's bow together in prayer before we get into this message, Move Left. Lord, here I sit in this beautiful den in DuBois, Wyoming, and commune with my beloved friends in the extended family, many of whom live back in the East Coast and other sections of the country, certainly, but a very great preponderance of them through my years of ministry back in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New England, and in those places that have been my traditional stomping grounds in ministry. And wherever they may be found, because there are some in the South and there are some in the West and some in Arizona, Lord, wherever these beloved brothers and sisters who are truly the family of God, and I'm proud of them and I thank you for them, wherever they may be as they listen to this tape, quicken them, O God, according to your loving kindness, and according to your tender mercy, open their heart to hear. Give them a willing heart to do your will, a willing heart to hear your will first, and then to do it. Give them sharp minds and keen spirits. May they recognize the truth that sets us free, and may they know your word. You have said your sheep hear your voice, and they know your voice, and they do not know the voice of strangers. I know in my heart with you that I'm not a stranger, and you called me to walk on the very left wing, left rim of things, sometimes in a precipice looking down into a canyon without a question. But you've been with me in it, and you've opened the minds and hearts of many people to great growth and change in their lives, and to a new and deeper understanding of you. Even as the Apostle Paul said, I wish that you knew what great conflict I have for you and for many that I haven't even known, that their hearts might be comforted, being knit together in love unto all riches of the full assurance of the understanding, acknowledging your mystery, Christ, in whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And so, in the words of Colossians, also may we have a steady growth in a fuller knowledge of God. May we understand that this is a day of great image change, and that we are, in fact, to move left. Give us hearts that will embrace the radicalism of faith and love. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, this is going to be a great adventure. I'm really going to share 3 recent fresh dreams with you that are revolutionary in content. And before I do that, I want to refresh your mind about one of the great passages in Scripture, Romans chapter 12, where Paul says in the Williams translation, I beg you, therefore, brothers, through these mercies God has shown you, to make a decisive, once-for-all dedication of your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, those of you who've known me for years and for decades of my long ministry know that I used to give an invitation to Christians to once-for-all present their bodies a living sacrifice. And I still would do that as the occasion called for it. And if you've never done that, I invite you to do so, to once for all dedicate everything you are and have forevermore to the living Christ, the cosmic Christ, to make a decisive dedication of your body as a living sacrifice, as it says in Williams, devoted and well-pleasing to God. That's your reasonable service. You know, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of people respond when I was preaching in mass meetings to that invitation, and they gave themselves body, soul, and spirit once for all to the Lordship of Christ. Many of them came back time and time again to tell me what a dynamic change that God had put an invisible mark on them and revolutionized, and many times turned their lives upside down. Sometimes they wanted to choke me, at least facetiously, because I had caused them some difficulties in the sense that God no longer stayed in church under the steeple on Sunday mornings, but was a very vital force in their lives day by day. So Paul goes on to say, stop living in accordance with the customs of this world. And you know the worst worldliness in the Scripture, and I don't have time to go into that at all today. Maybe someday you can listen to my old series on the Epistle of the Galatians. But the worst worldliness in the world is religious worldliness, when Christians are stuck in weak and beggarly elements and observe days and months and times and years. And so he's saying, stop living in accordance with the customs of this world. Now this means change your mind, change your attitude, change your lifestyle. Live a dynamic lifestyle with the indwelling Christ, the cosmic Christ. So stop living, Romans 12:2, Williams translation, in accordance with the customs of this world, but by the new ideals that mold your minds, continue to transform yourselves. I've got that by two phrases there circled in red. By the new ideals, continue to transform yourselves. Now that's your responsibility as a Christian, my friend, not to stagnate in a swamp. In Ezekiel 47, and we'll be studying that down the line, I had a great dream about it. And John Vash and John Tobin were in that dream with me, along with some other very key figures I'll tell you about later. But that's the great passage on the river that flows out from under the throne of God and is first ankle deep, then knee deep, then hip deep, then waters to swim in. Every place the river goes, there is great multiple vegetation and lushness and beauty and abundance. And the one place that isn't healed is the swamp. And many Christians are swamps. They go to church sometimes Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night, and there every time the door is open, take in everything is preached, and it does not affect them in the least. They don't change because it's dead. It's not in the power of the Holy Spirit, and they drink it in like a swamp with no outlet, and they have no outlet for it, and they stay the same in total stagnation. The one place that the river of God couldn't heal was a swamp. Never forget that. Don't be a swamp. He says, stop living in accordance with the customs of this world. Whether it's religious worldliness, fundamentalist worldliness, evangelical worldliness, Roman Catholic worldliness, or just plain secular worldliness, stop living according to those customs, but rather by the new ideals. I've got that circled in red. Continue to transform yourself. Now, another very favorite great verse on this is in Colossians, the 3rd chapter, and the 10th verse, where he says this, you put on the new self. And the new self is in process of being made new in the likeness of its Creator, so that you may attain a more perfect knowledge of Him. And concludes that passage by saying, Christ is everything, and in us all. So we're talking here about the indwelling Christ. Mold your minds by new ideals. Don't be conformed to the old ideals. Be transformed by molding your minds with new ideas that come from the Christ who's within. Put on the new man, as King James puts it, which is in constant process of being made new after the image of its Creator. Now that image is in your heart. You're created in the image of Christ, and that's why he says practice occupying your mind with things above, not with things on the earth. Great passages from Colossians, the 3rd chapter. So, put on, as Colossians 3 says, reiterating once more, put on the new man. Don't stay stuck in the same old rut. Be constantly in the process of renewal. Put on the new man, and Colossians says it so beautifully, which is in constant process of being made new after the image of the one who created it. Now, Christ has been created in you. As Paul prayed in Galatians 4:19, my little children, of whom I'm in birth pangs again, till Christ be formed in you. Now, this is the new image of God. This is the current wave, the cosmic Christ. Good old friend Matt Fox, who certainly preaches these things magnificently, along with his sidekick, the great scientist Rupert Sheldrake. And I've recommended their books for a long time, as you know, and mentioned them frequently in my messages on these tapes. Well, Matt Fox has written a book that just the title thrills me, The Coming of the Cosmic Christ. Now, it's not Jesus the Jew 2,000 years ago. He disappeared on purpose. And he says, though the Bible teaches us in Corinthians, though we've known that Christ after the flesh, we do not know him as Jesus the Jew after the flesh anymore. That's not the way to know him. He rather has parceled himself out Eucharistically. That's why the Lord's table is such a magnificent picture of this. You know, he's broken bread. He's poured out wine. He's poured the wine of the kingdom into your heart. That's part of your new image. And he has broken the bread as he did at the Last Supper, our Eucharistic service, and has taken up residence in each one of us. Now, later on, I'm going to bring, in probably the next tape, a marvelous thing I think I'll probably call the next tape, by a marvelous title that you're, I think, really going to be thrilled with, which is Total Enlightenment. And that comes from a great scientist, Max Planck. But we Christians have a great enlightenment. And I want to tell you about that enlightenment. And one of our dear sisters, Kathy, that many of you know, Kathy Kowalski, wrote me some of the most marvelous letters. You ought to see how I've marked them up from one end to the other. You know, I do that with many of your letters when you send them to me, because you send me a very fresh message from God like Kathy did. Well, we'll be getting to that in the next tape or two. I don't want to digress too much right now, but to say there's a total enlightenment that comes, that you're a new person. You have Christ in you. The coming of the cosmic Christ, as Matt Fox titles one of his excellent later books. Read it. It'll do you good. And so we don't know Christ after the flesh, Jesus the Jew, 2,000 years ago. We don't have to go to Israel and walk in his footsteps, though that might be nice at the right time. I've done it twice, and I enjoyed those trips. But we have Christ with us every moment of every day and every night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all of our life long. He's in us. We are the living temple. And we have the bread of life, the Eucharistic bread within our inner being. And we can commune with Christ day, by intuition, by impression of heart, by a still small voice, by dialoguing, by what's called the transcendent function, a permanent state of active imagination, the marvelous tool of active imagination that William Blake called imagination is God. Now, that's the Christ I'm getting across to you. Put on that new man, which is constantly renewed in the process of renewal after the image of him, the real Christ, the cosmic Christ that in the first place created him. You have that Christ within you. First embryonically, Paul prayed for the Galatian Christians, my little children, of whom I am in birth pangs again. I am agonizing a second time over you, till Christ be formed in you. And then he said about himself in Galatians 1:15, when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me, to reveal his Son in me. That's the very essence of Christianity. When it pleased God, who called me by his grace after separating me from my mother's womb. Maybe I'll come back to that more fully later. To reveal his Son in me. That's what I'm doing for you today. I'm revealing the Son in me and in you. I had to pause just a moment and take a drink of water right here by my chair. I don't know whether it's because the message is dry. I don't think so. I'm going to blame it on the high altitude. My son told me to drink lots and lots of water because you would become very rapidly dehydrated at high altitude, and I knew that from previous experience, but needed to be reminded afresh of that. So that having been said, put on the new man. Learn how to dialogue, to commune, to live with, to enjoy. This is a live-in thing. You've got Christ living in with you. And learn how to dialogue and enjoy him, even in the moments when you're not talking to one another. the Lord and I may ride for miles together up through the mountains. Once in a while see a bear. When Dannon, my son, was here visiting me, we just drove over a little rise up high in the pass, and there's a lovely little bear right there, a black bear, right in the middle of the road. And I pulled over and talked to him, rolled down the window. He was a safe distance. He fled up onto the bank a little bit, but he wasn't afraid of us at all, and I talked to him some more while he played around in the weeds. Well, you know, when you take great rides like that, of course I had my son with me that time, and you get up in nature and you enjoy it so much. Even when Dannon, he was down for just an overnight visit from Cody. But, you know, he didn't stay, but we had a great time together. But every day I have this wonderful live-in friend. And even when Dannon's not riding with me, the Lord Jesus is right there, the living Christ, the cosmic Christ. And we're communing one with another, even when we're not dialoguing. And we enjoy the bear together, literally, in the sunsets, over the Tetons, and the sunrises, and the rest of it. So learn how to dialogue with that inner Christ. Now I'm going to get to the little more revolutionary part of the message here. Here's what happens if you do dialogue with the inner Christ. Now I'm going to say this to you, that God not only communes with us in the deep recesses of our innermost being, the inner sanctum of the temple of our hearts. He not only gives us, not only does he write as he promised he would, in 2 Corinthians 3 and Hebrews 8 and 10 and other passages, I'll put my law in your mind. You know, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Put on the new man, which is constantly in process of being made new. He puts his law in your mind. There's a way that seems right to you, with peace, and the peace of God acting as umpire in your heart, as Colossians says. And you're thinking, this is the right thing to do, and your whole being is made up on that. Doubtless it is the right thing to do 99 times out of 100. We can all make mistakes, but I tell you, he says, I'll put my law in your mind. Not only so, but you feel deeply within you. I'll write it in your heart. Now, read Hebrews 8 and 10 and 2 Corinthians 3. We're living epistles, 2 Corinthians 3 says, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not in tables of stone, but in the fleshy tables of the heart. And perhaps you can hear that phone ringing in the background. I'm going to let it ring because it has an answering machine on it. But I forgot to unplug phone number 2 out in the living room, so I apologize if it's distracting you. But remember, we have this marvelous experience of having God put this in our deepest heart. So our heart is where our feeling, our deep impressions are. And God says, I'll put my law in your heart. So you think this is the right thing to do, and you feel deeply this is the way, walk ye in it. In fact, Isaiah 30 promises that your ears will hear a word, your deep inward ear. This is the way, walk ye in it, when you turn to the right hand and to the left. It isn't that hard to be a triumphant Christian and to enjoy the rough and tumble of a vigorous spiritual life. It isn't easy, and God told us it wouldn't be easy. It's through many tribulations we enter into the kingdom of God. But it certainly is a robust, marvelous adventure. And I've been doing my best to share my enthusiasm along those lines for years. Now, there's another key way that you know that God speaks to us, and I want to get right on with that, because that's the next thing I want to share with you. Move left. Where does that phrase come from? Well, it comes from a dream, and I'll tell you about it in a moment. But I'm reading from the Revised Standard Version, Job chapter 33. Easy to remember 2 3s when you want to tell somebody that is brainwashed in dead fundamentalism and they're scared to death of dreams. My friend Herman Ripple told me that he was rejected many times in ministry in fundamentalist churches because he introduced dreams. That's his chief minister. And they wouldn't let him come back and preach again. Well, I've had the same experience. And Herman certainly was a pioneer in these things. But in any case, Job 33, don't people try to believe the Bible, and they don't believe the Bible and don't practice it. And here Job is getting a message from a marvelous young man, the fourth man theme, which someday I'll introduce to you again. Very, very important one, the fourth man. And you'll hear that in this series, appears in your dream. It'll probably be a tape down the line a little bit from this one, titled The Return of Corky. That's a strange title, isn't it? But he was the fourth man in a great dream. In any case, listen to what Elihu, the fourth man in Job's experience, says to him. He had some sense. He says, "Behold, God will speak to you in the night." I'm looking for my verse here. "For God speaks in one way," verse 14 of Job 33, "and in two, and man doesn't perceive it." He says God may speak to you a couple times and you don't get the message. Well, we've all had that experience of not being very good students and not very alert sometimes. And then he says this, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men." And now I don't know whether you can hear all of these background noises or not, but I have a bird clock clear out there in the living room, and right now it's 1 o'clock and my bird is singing faithfully. So I hope you enjoy the bird singing. Which leads me to digress just a little bit here to tell you that I was sitting on my deck yesterday, and I had my Kalanchoe plants out there in the deck, both of them, along with 2 other plants. Out of my 8 plants, 4 of them survived the move from California. And Kalanchoes are tough, and the one of them has a good number of beautiful red blossoms all summer long, and the other one has magnificent foliage, but only one tiny little red blossom. Now, I was sitting out on my deck yesterday, and I had said to God, I don't know if I'm going to fill my hummingbird feeder again. It's getting along toward fall, and maybe they've all left, especially up here in the mountains. But while I'm sitting there sipping my cup of coffee, a lovely little hummingbird about the size of my finger came up to the plant loaded with blossoms, which was about 4 feet from me, and just enjoyed, sucking the juice out of each blossom, getting the sweetness out of life. And then, to my dismay, for a hummingbird is a symbol of Sophia, the feminine side of God to me, and they teach us how to get the sweetness out of life. That hummingbird had no fear of me whatsoever and came right over. I could have reached out literally like I'm reaching out and touching the stand that my tape recorder is on right now, at arm's length. She flew over within arm's length. I could have petted her. I didn't attempt to do that, and she thought she'd check that one little blossom that's on my other healthy Kalanchoe plant, and then she left, and I knew God had sent me a symbol. Now, remember, on my book list is Ted Andrews' great book, Animal Speaks, and it'll tell you more about great experiences like that. But I had to digress from dreams for a moment to mention hummingbirds, one of my favorite omens, and thought to be fairies sent from the feminine side of God. And so I couldn't resist mentioning that to you when I heard the bird clock singing out in the living room. It was a wonderful experience. Now, back to the dreams here in Job 33, and Elihu, the fourth man, is saying, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, while they slumber on their bed, then God opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings. And sometimes you do have to have the real strong dream. And however, if you walk with God and listen carefully, rarely will you have a nightmare or a threatening dream, has been my experience. But if you're not accustomed to trying to listen to God and you're stuck in your ego and running your own show, you may get a terrifying nightmare to warn you. And here's what the Bible clearly teaches. Then he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings. It's a very famous case, for example, that a mountain climber came to Dr. Carl Jung, one of my heroes and one of the founders of modern psychoanalysis and a great modern prophet, and he said to Jung during the course of their dialogue together that he had had a terrifying dream that he fell off a mountain and got killed. And Jung, with all seriousness that he could muster, warned the man sternly. He said, do not go mountain climbing for a while. He knew he was a mountain climber. Don't take the chance. That's a warning to you to stay away from it. And unfortunately, the man didn't heed his warning and was not very much later killed in a mountain climbing accident. So God does sometimes send us stern warning dreams when we haven't heard all of the other things that I've been referring to, paying attention to the Word in our heart and renewing our mind and listening to what God's written in our mind and what we think and feel is the right way, and paying attention to the signs and the omens that God puts every day in our path in this wonderful thing called a spiritual walk. And by the way, this passage says, in the dream visions of the night, while they slumber on their bed, he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings. That would be like a nightmare. So that he can turn man aside from his deed and cut off pride from man, keep back his soul from the pit, from death, in other words, and his life from perishing by the sword. And then if you don't hear the dreams, then the next step is man is also chastened with pain upon his bed and with continual strife in his bones, so that his life loathes bread and he can't eat any more, and his appetite loathes dainty food, and his flesh wastes away. So a lot of times the reason we get sick is because we don't heed the other warnings. Not always, but that happens many a time. As my old friend Dr. Walter Leckler says, pain is our friend to teach us where we're off the track. Now, I think this is a perfect time to stop and turn the tape over. So here we go on side 2. And I have to tell you that I'm enjoying this tremendously as I sit in my lovely den here. I just wish you could all come and visit me in Du Bois and see the beautiful little house God gave me here, a rental, and how marvelously it's fixed up and decorated. And as I've told you previously, that's due to the wonderful love of Nancy and Mike, and they're taking 9 days out of their business. And by the way, God has greatly prospered their business this summer with lots and lots of work. She and Mike have been really super busy, in fact so busy, showing people around. Now, they haven't gotten rich or anything like that, and they need continued prayer. And so that a lot of these things, properties that they've shown, will turn into cash in their bank account. But they have had some closings, and they've had an extremely busy summer, so busy in business, real estate, and Cody, that they have been looking forward to the fall and winter, when things just automatically begin to slow down a bit. And, of course, we're getting into that season. But they took time out of their busy schedule there in June to take 9 days to beautifully set up this place. And I'm sitting here reflecting on what a lovely, beautiful den. It's almost like they picked the thing up in California and set it down here 1,200 miles northeast in Du Bois, Wyoming. But I wish you could all come and see my place, and if you have opportunity, you just let me know in advance. But on with what I was telling you, as I sit here in this den, I was here this morning, this very morning. In fact, God told me exactly what he wanted me to tell you today, from 4:30 until 6 o'clock this morning. I had one of the shortest night's sleeps that I've had. I have been able to sleep 9-10 hours while I've been here, time and time again, as I gradually get my strength back, and I'm so grateful it's coming back. But in any case, God did something different last night. I went to bed about 11, and about 4:30 this morning, he got me up and he said, I want you to get into your journal and put down those dreams that I've given you, because sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, I have a micro-cassette recorder on my nightstand right next to my bed, right next to my head, and I can reach out at arm's length and pick that recorder up when God gives me a dream, and I record it right then, which is much easier than writing it down when you're groggy. And there would be dreams that I would have forgotten completely if I hadn't had a nice little inexpensive micro-cassette recorder next to my bed. And you just set the thing up before you go to sleep, Because if you wake up like I do and you're groggy, why, you might not do too good a job of running the machine. But if it's all set so that all you have to do is push the pause button, I offer this to you as an excellent suggestion to keep your dreams. And then we don't always have time the next morning to journal our dream. And sometimes I'll let a week or so pass before I do it. But it's right there on tape and it isn't lost. Whereas if you don't record it and honor the unconscious and show God, who is the unconscious, that you appreciate his messages, they'll probably dry up and you won't have very many dreams. But if you honor your unconscious, either by having a journal on your nightstand with a flashlight and a pen to put the dream down as fast as you can, and if you don't, you'll forget details. But for me, my newer method is to have that microcassette there, and I laugh at myself when I listen to it a day or a few days later when I'm journaling it, because I sound pretty darn groggy in the middle of the night, but I can make it out all right, and there are details that I've already forgotten that are on that tape, which are important details. So I suggest that to you. I throw that out as a mechanical suggestion to help you in listening to the word of the Lord. Now, God got me up at 4:30 this morning, and I had a few dreams on my microcassette, and he said, let's put them in the journal. And then after I put them in the journal and was just jumping up and down for joy at these dreams, which you'll hear here, move left. Then, I was so grateful that I had them on my microcassette and now in my journal, because I want to share a very deep and beautiful message with you in this last part of the tape. And I want you to write back, and after you've reflected on it a while, and tell me what it said to you, because I really appreciate your love notes and letters. And do bear in mind, please, as I think about writing back and forth, that we have had a run here of what the world would call bad luck. I told you that we lost some donors, one of which gave $2,000 a month. That's 2 years ago. That's a $48,000 loss in income. And then more recently, another couple that would give between $400 to $800 to $1,000 fell on evil days in their lives and are struggling through a hard time. And I'm not going to say any more than that, but to ask you to pray for them. God knows who they are. And they haven't been able to give, and we've had that happen several times. And so we're really up against it financially, and I ask that you consider giving hilariously, and if possible increasing your gift and giving as regularly as you possibly can if you want to see this work go on. Now that's about all I'm going to say on this tape about that, but please give that very careful consideration. It takes money to wage war, and it takes God's money to wage God's war, and we've been in one hell of a battle here, and we need your help. And we need it badly, and we need it now. And if I'm going to do all kinds of physical checkups and everything, that's going to make more money demands on our already flat treasury. So keep that in mind. And the Lord led me to turn aside and say that to you. Now to the dreams. God speaks in dreams. And he doesn't always speak, as Job's friend was telling him, in threatening fashion with nightmares. He gives you beautiful dreams. And that's what he got me up to journal this morning. Now this first one was journaled already, but the two that follow I journaled this morning. And just look at this mosaic that is woven by these three dreams. Now we went through hell itself in a great spiritual battle in California that I'll tell you a lot more about, that has to do with my prophetic and intercessory office. And I won a great victory and changed the priesthood. And there are also other things that were accomplished that God is giving me piece by piece that I myself don't understand. And so you be praying with me about the other missing pieces of that California mystery. But God has given me total assurance that it was a very important battle and a terrific victory. And it sure took enough out of me, I'll tell you that. Almost finished me off, and that's no exaggeration. So I'm delighted to be feeling stronger and sharing these things as God shares them with me and permits me to share them with you. So here in June, at the end of June, after I'd been here almost a month, and very nice digital clock time too, 3:44 a.m. I recorded this dream first on microcassette and then later on in my journal. And this was a great dream because one of my favorite people was the key person in it. What do they used to call that in plays? Dramatis personae or something like that, Latin phrase, the dramatic personnel. Well, there was one key person in this dream, and guess who it was? It was the now rather long-retired favorite entertainer, and he certainly is one of my all-time favorites, Johnny Carson. Appeared to me in a dream, looking as healthy and happy as anybody could, and he, as I say, he's been a number of years in retirement, and I thought he was one of the greatest entertainers of all times. And I do have some of his old tapes that I watch periodically, and always get blessed by them, the humor and the acts and everything else. Well, in my dream, you know you're reaching a turning point when you get this kind of message. Johnny Carson was telling me after I'd been here in Du Bois about a month, repeatedly, that good things are being born. Good things, great things are coming forth and going to happen. And he repeated that. That's all he had to say to me. He came personally to tell me that we were going to be blessed. And that was a great feel-good dream. Good things are happening. Great things are coming forth and are going to happen. Now, what does that mean? Why did God select Johnny Carson especially to do this? So I said to God, well, you know I love Johnny Carson. He's a fantastic entertainer. But why did you select him in the dream to come and tell me this wonderful message that great and good things are happening? He said, who was Johnny Carson? Quick as a flash, I got a revelation. I got hit by lightning. And God said in my mind, he's the king of late night television. He was the king of late night television. He's the king. He still is. Nobody's ever come near him. Not any of his successors, not David Letterman or anybody else, in the opinion of a good many people, and certainly it's my opinion. No one has ever come near Johnny Carson. He is still the king of late night. Well, I've been through a very dark night of the soul, and here's the king of late night coming to tell me good things, and great things are happening. Isn't that glorious? It makes me cry. Emerging from a dark night of the soul, the king who rules the night comes to tell me good things and great things are happening, a man of entertainment and laughter. That's what you call a very positive message from the heart of God to my heart. Now, probably almost a couple of months later, because that one was back in June, at the end of June, or let's say a month and a half later, I had this dream. And I have titled this tape, Move Left. And here's why. In this dream, I was rock climbing, which is something I would never do in 3 dimensions. Back when I was young, I had a rifle on my back, and I was not a rock climber, but I did a stupid thing, and I took a perpendicular path right up what was almost rock climbing, a cliff, and I got stuck halfway up. And let me tell you, that was one of the most unpleasant, unnerving experiences of my entire life. I thought that God was going to have me spend the rest of my career stuck on the side of a cliff. Thank God I finally got down. There was no one else around to help me. But it was, I have to tell you, quite terrifying at the time, although I laugh at it now. I am not a rock climber, but in this dream, I was as old as I am right now, and of course I am 71. I have a heart problem, and I'm overweight, which would dictate that you are not a choice candidate for rock climbing. But in the dream, anything can happen. And I was rock climbing an almost perpendicular cliff. And it was a piece of cake. I did it like a mountain goat. And I did it at my present grandpa age of 71. And my grandchildren were climbing with me. They were kind of indistinct and fuzzy. Their faces weren't sharp and bright. God made them background characters in this dream. But they were admiring my mountain goat abilities, and they were proud of their grandpa. for the achievement of going right up the side of a sheer cliff, and they were very impressed. In other words, these were, I've got sons and daughters, and then I'm old enough now in the Lord, I've got grandsons and granddaughters, spiritually speaking, and I'm the old man of the mountain now to them. And then the scene changed, and this is very important. Evening came on of that same day, and we were climbing that cliff again, of all things. And here, at my advanced age as a grandpa and all that, we were climbing that cliff again, perpendicular cliff, and it was, this time it was a formidable obstacle to us, because we were exhausted from having used all the energy that very day of climbing the cliff, and here I am, an old man, climbing a cliff again that same day along toward night. So it was much more formidable on this climb, but an odd thing happened. Hear this carefully. I had great help from the inner voice that kept saying to me, and here's the title of your tape, go left, which I did and found a much easier path than I did earlier in the day, and got to the top again on a much easier path, and we were, of course, very thrilled and excited that we had been able to achieve that formidable objective twice in the same day, but the second climb in the night and along toward night was much easier up that perpendicular cliff. Now, by the way, the cliff, for some reason or other, you might ponder this with me, was straight up, but it was not like climbing a cliff here on the side of a mountain in Wyoming. It was straight up logs and rocks and mud, kind of like the face of a dam, and very formidable. It would be like climbing up a big dam that was made out of rocks, logs, and mud, but it was as high as any mountain cliff here in Wyoming. Now, I was not exhausted or threatened by the night climb, and God's voice, go left, helped me greatly. He found a much easier path for me, and I had this dream at 1:22 a.m., which is a rather rare dream time for me. And my youngest grandson, Justin, who's very close to me, was most impressed by his grandpa being able to climb that cliff twice in a day. But imagine, the inner voice showed me an easier path in old age. Now, I'm happy to say that my beloved grandchildren, and I've got many spiritual grandchildren, as I said, as well as children, have just been a marvelous blessing to me. I have one granddaughter and 3 grandsons, and I love every one of them dearly. And I love it when I get a chance to see them face to face. And the younger one, Justin, the youngest one, who's now in his second year in college in Findlay University in Ohio, opened his eyes in this world in my arms. I was holding him right after he was born, right there in the delivery room, and he's proud of his grandpa, and I'm proud that he's proud of his grandpa. And so he was very close to me, and in this dream he was proud of his grandpa for climbing the cliff twice. And I wrote this in my journal. Maybe they're again impressed with the difficulties I'm handling as the nighttime of life comes on. I am still an overcomer, hallelujah. And obviously the cosmic Christ wants me moving once again radically to the left in obedience to the voice. Bear that in mind. The cosmic Christ wants me moving radically again to the left in obedience to the voice. The voice told me move left, and at one point even pulled me left. I felt him take me by the collar and pull me onto that left path. And it's amazing, because back in the mid-'80s, my determination to obey God and move left, and another great dream he gave me, cost me the friendship of a co-worker that I was with, because he couldn't embrace my radicalism, even though I did it in obedience to God. And it closed some doors for me at that time, but God opened some new ones. Now, what does that mean, move left? Well, I want you to hear this very carefully, because that same night, or the next night, I can't quite discern for sure from my microcassette, but I had a great dream. And in the dream that followed, the move left dream, this is my path in old age as I climb the cliff once again. I have a hard ministry. I know that's what the perpendicular cliff means, why it's made of wood and stone and that kind of thing, more like a dam than a cliff. I don't know, but believe me, it was big and it was perpendicular. If you've got any ideas, maybe God will give me some future ones, but you be sure and share them with me. But I had this second dream right on the heels of move left. And in this dream, I was in New Jersey. Now, New Jersey means a lot to me because it also means like New England, New York City that I love, Philadelphia that I love, Pennsylvania and Upper New York State, my stomping grounds where I've carried on so much of my official ministry. So it's my official ministry sphere, and in the dream I was right smack in the middle of my official ministry sphere where I've done all kinds of itineraries in New Jersey. And this may make your hair stand on end. In the dream I was asked to officiate at a gay wedding. In other words, in the most public possible way, I was asked to perform this ceremony for two middle-aged men, one of whom wore a yellow straw hat that really captured my attention. It really got my attention. There was something about that hat. And I agreed to do this ceremony. And a dark cloud was hanging over the affair. And a liberal pastor who was there asked if my children wouldn't object to my performing the ceremony, which he would not do. And I said, no, they're more liberal than I am. Well, in any case, the guy in the middle-aged man in the yellow hat and I were together, and the dark cloud came down on us, and we ran into the house to get out, to hide from it, and we laid down to hide until it passed. And I looked up through a shaft in the house, and I could see the black underside of that very dark cloud as it passed over, and it passed quickly, and we proceeded with the ceremony, and neither of us was shaken by the ominous cloud. And what came to my mind was Exodus 20, verse 21, concerning Moses, and Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. Whenever God appears in a new way, and he is becoming what he shall become, I have here in my hand a little Penguin classic book titled The Cloud of Unknowing. Now, this is a very famous book that I've mentioned before, and the description of this book is this. Like Thomas à Kempis in his great book, The Imitation of Christ, this book, The Cloud of Unknowing, remember the dark cloud, the cloud of unknowing, springs from an age when European mysticism was in full flower. Its author was probably an English country parson of the late 14th century, but his exact identity remains unknown. The book's main theme is that God cannot be apprehended by man's intellect, and that only love can pierce the cloud of unknowing which lies between them. Its charm and serenity have always ensured it a place among the devotional classics of the church. This cloud has appeared many times in my dreams. As you may remember, the atomic energy plant dream where the bright cloud unfolding itself was causing people to drop like flies until I started praying for them. This has been my ministry in a special office as a John the Baptist type. The forerunner of the new God image is that it is also a very dangerous experience for the uninitiated and for those who aren't ready for it. So this is a mediatorial aspect here. The cloud comes down approvingly on this ceremony, which evidently I performed in the dream. And the last time I saw the one fellow in the yellow hat, the middle-aged man, who I might say especially, his features were very indistinct. His hat somehow really caught my curiosity, and his features were indistinct, almost like they were garbled, like I think Dick Tracy once had a character called Anyface, who was kind of a waxy-faced guy, could put on any countenance he wanted to. But this fellow's features were scrambled, so I couldn't make out who it was. And the other fellow in the ceremony I paid little or no attention to. He wasn't a key character at all, but the fellow in the yellow hat was, and I wondered why I couldn't figure out what his features were. And I even talked to Nancy on the phone about it and found out that I was wrong about it being a Panama hat. And then I just thought, why is that hat so fascinating? And I got a great aha moment, like I got hit by a thunderbolt, that it was my dad's hat when I was a boy, my father. And then it made full sense to me. And this is why it made full sense to me, because my beloved father, who incidentally on this very day, August 31, when I'm doing this tape, if he had lived, and very few people do live to that age, would have been 105. And so I dedicate this tape to my dad. I had wonderful parents, and if I were to live again, I'd choose them to be my parents again. But Dad, a special symbol in my dreams. He's appeared many times through the years, and he hasn't appeared for a long time now, until this dream. Now, you'll be amused with this, but I trust also richly blessed by it. Do you know why my dad and his that yellow hat he wore everywhere, like when he was going down to the little town of Wesleyville to Maley's Electric Company to pick up some electric supplies and things, that was his everyday hat. And I didn't recognize it until I was into the dream interpreting it quite a ways. But my dad is a special symbol. He was for over 40 years, I believe, at Bethel Baptist Temple in Erie, Pennsylvania, a real right-wing fundamentalist dead-letter church with some wonderful people in it, but a real legalistic, fundy church. He was for 40 years one of the chief deacons. And Dad and I had interesting interactions. As soon as I went away to seminary in my early 20s, I began to move leftward. Just like this dream, the title is Move Left. Be more radical. Move left. And in your old age, it's going to be the easiest path for you. God's going to show me an easy path. He is. And this, of course, is a very left-wing dream. And I would come home from seminary, and Dad and I would have these great discussions. And he was a very loving man, and he wasn't a flaming, fighting fundamentalist, but he used to cut the heart out of me when he didn't even know he was doing it, because I was being courageous and adventuring into what the living Christ showed me in those days, and I wanted his approval, being my father. And God finally told me, you're asking your dad for something he cannot give you. He does not have that gift to give to you. He's given you many gifts, but he can't give you his approval because it violates his deepest convictions. And he used to say to me, Bruce, I know you're not a liberal, but, because I was even moving leftward back in my earliest youth. But Dad and I had a wonderful, wonderful relationship. But he would appear in my dreams over the years since, and I'll tell you one that I think you'll find comical and also very instructive. The last time I saw Dad before this dream that I'm telling you about, a hearse, a dead wagon, rolled up in front of me. The back gates flew open. There didn't seem to be any human instruments, agencies there at all, but the back doors of the hearse flew open. The casket came flying out. The lid flew open, and my dad sat up in that casket. And I went over and said, Dad, I want to tell you one thing. You are a symbol of Yahweh to me, the old God image, and I don't want to see you around again. I said, I'm looking forward to having a great time with you in heaven, and you and I will reminisce and have good laughs and have a great old time, but don't you come back in any one of my dreams ever again while I'm in the body and breathing. And I pushed him down in the casket and slammed the lid shut, shoved it up into the truck, closed the doors, and it drove off. And I have never seen my dad in a dream until this one. And I imagine you're getting a good laugh along with me. And the reason he's in this dream is that Yahweh comes back to a very left-wing ceremony, a gay wedding, which Yahweh frowned on with great wrath and totality. And that's why we have so much anti-gay sentiment, to this day. It strikes at what many feel are their deepest Christian convictions. And so here I am performing this liberal ceremony, and it's my dad, it's Yahweh, who has come to embrace a love and a tenderness, and the side that he rejected. In other words, he's accepting a side of himself that he once hated and rejected totally. He's accepting his shadow side and integrating it into his new image. This is a truly, truly remarkable dream. It's amazing what a mosaic God paints with these things. Now you say, what in the world are you saying? Well, I'm going to be giving you some other dreams, Ezekiel's river dreams, and future studies in this series on transformation, because we are transformers, and God's image is being transformed. It's not only that we as men are being transformed, but in our dialectical relationship with God, in our interaction, in our Jacobean wrestling matches. Jacob wrestled with God. That's what a dialectic is. It's a struggle between thesis and antithesis, the opposite side, just like gay rights and no gay rights and so on, Christian tradition versus gay rights and that kind of thing. And I'm not commenting on the political movement. I'm not commenting on the social movement. I'm telling you what God is telling me about his image to pass on to you, and that's the important thing here. God is accepting a more tender and feminine part of himself and becoming united with it. That's what marriage is a union with a part that he totally rejected before. We suffered, please note, carefully, no ill effects from this very dangerous dark cloud. Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. That's the amorphous, unknown God. That's the mystical book that I just reintroduced again to you, the medieval classic, The Cloud of Unknowing. The only way you can know that God, as Jung put it so beautifully, Carl Jung, the man who loves God will know God. And that, for example, is why Job knew him, and that's why Jung writes so magnificently in Encounter with the Self, or Edinger and Jung together on the book of Job, that God finally comes to Job in the end of Job's ordeal and says, this is the way I really am, and that's why I treated you this way. And then because of Job and because of Jesus, God has continued to become what he shall become. He has evolved in his own image and lifestyle and has gone from glory to glory as he wants us to do. I hope this is becoming clear to you. We exist in a dialectical relationship with God, and as we evolve and change, God evolves and changes with us in a very real way. We grow together in love. It was not a tender God who said to Moses, who put up with Israel for 40 long years in the wilderness and all of their rebellions and everything else, and then at the end, God in his very macho masculinity and anger, because Moses struck the rock a second time, says, you'll never get into the land. And 40 years of work went right down the tubes, and Moses only got a peek from the top of, I think it was Mount Nebo or Mount Moriah, I forget which one. But in any case, that's all he got. That's not a tender-hearted God. But he's becoming tender-hearted. And he's embracing a part of himself that he formerly totally rejected. My dad totally symbolizes to me Yahwehistic, Baptist, fundamentalist, legalistic religion, even though he himself was a marvelous human being. And there were many marvelous, loving human beings in Bethel Baptist Church and other similar churches. It's just that their religion froze them into Old Testament patterns and negated the grace of God for which Jesus came and died and rose again for us. I hope I'm making myself somewhat clear. This is a very important dream. It's one that you call a conjunctio dream. Back in 1995, I told my friend Francis Whiting, the great theologian who was a delegate to the Second Vatican Council and a noted Episcopalian priest and my bosom buddy that I love dearly, one of the greatest theologians I've ever known. I told him that I'd had a dream, and I've had this dream 3 or 4 times, in which I was dressed in a camel coat, and I was to officiate at a great wedding, and we were in a magnificent palace, and I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off because I was trying to find out what my part was in the wedding ceremony. And finally a voice said to me that calmed me down completely and quieted my soul, "The ceremony is not until the evening." And he said, "You don't have to worry about it now. God will tell you in the evening of your life," and so on. Well, I'm getting along into the evening of my life, and God's telling me, move left, climb the cliff again. He's showing me, imagine, in an incredibly difficult climb for a second time in my life, he's saying, the easiest path for you, the one I want you on. In fact, he tugged me to the left by my coat collar at one point and kept saying to me, move left, move left. That's because I'm heralding as a John the Baptist in my camel coat. He wore camel's hair, remember? The change in the image of God to a much more moderate and loving and kind, sensitive, tender-hearted image, more like Jesus Christ introduced 2,000 years ago. And God is finally embracing that image today in a much greater way. Now, in a tape that's coming up soon, I'm going to tell you about the experience of the Ezekiel's River in the 47th chapter of Ezekiel, and the return of the fourth man. And in that dream, some of my favorite spiritual sons, and I thank God for all of you, sons and daughters, but John Tobin, that I mentioned earlier in the tape, and John Vash were in the dream with me. We were all dressed up in beautiful black suits with white shirts and magnificent neckties, and we were wading around ankle deep in a magnificent crystal river. That's Ezekiel's River, excuse me, that flows out from the throne of God. And as we were wading around there in the river, I was reminded there was an atmosphere there of the men's movement and Robert Bly. And very frankly, I have to confess to you that I knew little or nothing about Robert Bly's contribution to our age. He's a contemporary who is the father, excuse me, of what's known as the men's movement in this country. And there was something about that dream in the atmosphere, so I'll set the pace for you and I'll bring that dream up in the next tape or two, that reminded me of the men's movement and Robert Bly. Now, I have to confess, as I say, that I didn't know much about Robert Bly. I knew that he'd written a book, I think, called Iron John. But to my happy surprise, the Lord said, you've got one book by Robert Bly, and I remembered I did have. And once again, my dear friend Terry Torchia had sent it to me back in April of 1997. Well, I have to say that I didn't rediscover that book until July 19th of this year. And I found out that here is a best-selling book titled The Soul is Here for Its Own Joy. Sacred Poems from Many Cultures, edited and with an introduction by Robert Bly. And it's a groundbreaking anthology of spiritual poems. In fact, the Irish writer Sean O'Phelan said, all good writing, I love this line, listen to it carefully, is in the end the writer's argument with God. Isn't that a great line? All good writing is in the end the writer's argument with God. Well, these poems form both a celebration and a quest, a kind of pilgrim's progress that embraces all the rich wisdom of East and West, ancient and modern, male and female, spirit and flesh. God is rediscovering his feminine side. Sophia, as she's known historically. That's why the cathedral is called St. Sophia in Istanbul, because the Eastern Church always kept in touch with the feminine side of God. And so this man who wrote this book, The Soul is Here for Its Own Joy, has long been involved as a teacher and speaker with the development of the men's movement in the United States. And it all has to do with these magnificent poems, with the discovery, rediscovery, and of the more tender side of masculinity. That we don't have to have a macho, Yahwehistic approach to life, that we can understand that we have a feminine side, and that God today is saying to us, I shall become who I shall become. All we ever have is an image of God. And today God is taking up his cross and dying anew to his old self, and doing what he advises us to do, to put on the new man, which is in the constant state of renewal. as we grow together in a deeper, more loving, and light-filled spirituality. One of the poems from Robert Bly's book is called The Holy Longing by Goethe. And he says, "Tell a wise person or else keep silent, because the mass man will mock it away. I praise what is truly alive, what longs to be burned to death. In calm water of the love nights where you were begotten, where you have begotten, a strange feeling comes over you when you see the silent candle burning. Now you're no longer caught in the obsession with darkness, and a desire for higher lovemaking sweeps you upward. Distance does not make you falter. Now arriving in magic, flying, and finally insane for the light, you are the butterfly, and you are gone. And so long as you haven't experienced this, to die and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on the dark earth." God bless you, my dear friends. Move left. Move left. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.